Hello, I'm Eric. I'm a software engineer. Welcome back to another entry of my Code With Me video series. We are continuing work on our Kanban task tracker. If you didn't see the latest video, which I'll link up top, we uh, ported over our task data into our already existing add task uh, modal, add task modal, and now we have actually updated that so we have an edit task, which I've just realized now still says add new task at the top, so I don't really want that. But the focus of today, after we make that adjustment, is to actually edit the task. All we're doing right now is we're logging that edited task that we received back from this modal, and now we're going to try to devise a way to actually update our whole state, all of our board information here with our new task. So first, let's go to our task modal, and right here we've got add new task, right? And I can very easily make that. We're sending in task data, maybe. We should be able to adjust this very quickly to a ternary operator, where basically we just say, like, if we have task data, then we're going to return edit task. Otherwise, we'll return add new task. And I think that should work out fine for us, right? So let's click edit task. This says edit task now. We click that plus button. We have add new task. That's fine, cool. We don't need to do anything else with that. So now we want to actually do something in our Immer file. So let's go look at our Immer functions, and let's pull those over here to the, if I can, to the right side of our VS Code, and let's bring this all the way out. We've got, we're calling the edit from the task view card, and here's where our edit task function is. Again, right now we're just console.logging our completed task data. So what are we going to do with this? I made some notes for myself here in the Immer functions file where we need to edit a task. And I don't know about this part if I need to store this in a variable. We're getting this as a variable. So I should just be able to get my task as a variable. And we've already got a couple other things here. We've got a delete task method, which removes any task that we send over to it. Which is based on the board index that we're on, the column index, and the task itself, right? Because we're sending over task index, all of that information. Each task, the way I have this working right now is we're mapping through all of this data. So each board is mapped. So each board knows what index it is in the giant JSON data file that we have. We'll take a look at that real quick. Here's our JSON data file, right? So we map through the boards array. So platform launches the first board in that array, so it knows it's at index 0. The columns array of that board, the to-do column knows it's index 0, right? All that stuff, all the way down to tasks. So if we delete a task, it sends back those indexes, so it knows we don't have to do a search algorithm in here. We don't have to do a find index to find those things. We could adjust this, and we could do that stuff, and I could get rid of all those indexes that we passed down, but they exist right now, so we're using them. So that's what they're here for. We have an add task function, which does a very similar thing. Excuse the lag as this spreads back out. Where basically we send over the board data, the board index number, whatever the new task is. We do find column index here, right? Because if we're making a new task, it doesn't already know what column it belongs in because it's new, right? So it uses whatever our task status is. And task status, man, I'm going to keep doing this. Task status would be to do or doing, and those are the titles of the columns, so we can use that status and look through and find that particular column using the find index method, right, on that array. I reviewed this code previously in another session. Um, so, again, I'll link up top to the full playlist of Kanban task tracker videos I have so far, in case you want to go back and catch up with some of them and see where things are at. So the way I'm thinking about editing a task is I'm not really making adjustments to the task in the state because our state is a giant nested object, right? So talked about this in previous videos as well. In React, your state is immutable. So in order to update an object or an array that is in state, you need to make a copy of that and then use your setter function with your copy. Otherwise, you're just pointing back to the same object in memory, and you're not allowed to make your adjustments to your object in state as you would in regular JavaScript land. React isn't a fan of that, right? So that's the React framework, that's the way that works. So we'll make a copy of this thing first, make our edits, and that's what Immer allows us to do. If you're not familiar with Immer, I've made a video on that as well, a brief video introduction to how that's working. I'll link to that one as well in a card above, so feel free to check that out. So what we're going to do when we're editing a task, we've got a number of things we can do here, right? And the functionality that we need to be aware of is not only, if I click edit here, not only can I edit title, description, and the subtasks, but I can edit the status of this thing. And that's where the concern is for me. So, if we look at our big JSON object here, this is what is being displayed on our screen here. And when we make edits to this stuff, if I'm adding in a new task, all right, I can tell this thing to go into the to-do column of platform launch, and it's going to make a new object over here in this array with title and description and all that stuff. Cool. If we're editing a task, what's going to happen? Well, it's going to pull, quote unquote, this information, right? Because we have this task object. Let's say we're looking at, build UI onboarding flow. This is that task that we have highlighted. This component is what I have is like a task preview card, which has that task data, right? Because we've mapped over all of our boards here. We're mapping over all those columns. Here's 1, 2, and 3, which is off screen. There's the done column. And then we map over all the tasks in that task array. So here's 0, 1, 2, 3, right? And our 0 position is build UI for onboarding. So if I open this up, here's that data that has been mapped and is displayed correctly within this giant object. Now if I edit this, I'm in effect going to be making a new task the way I have this set up, right? We know, based on the previous video, our functionality is just making a new state, right? State is existing here in this modal, so to speak, and we're just pulling the data that exists. We're not actually updating the state of that data. We're just using that data to make a new object that we're sending back here into this function that's kind of being hidden over here, right? So if I send this state, this task, this new task object over to Immer, I'm not actually going to directly edit this, right? I guess I could write a function that checks a bunch of stuff, and if things are different, then we just edit this. But the main thing that can happen in editing is that we can change that status. And when we change the status, this whole task is going to move anyway, right? And if I look at my Immer function, what I've got here is I've got an update task status function. And look at all the stuff that's going on here, right? We need to, this is probably going to help if I pull this file over here, actually. Oops, let's not do that. Don't save that. Let's try that one more time. Put it here, right? So why do I have a breakpoint? We call our update task status function. We send in the board data as it exists already, all of it. we pass in a board index number so we know what board we're on, because that's easy enough. We don't have the capability here to move tasks from one board to another. That's not a thing we need to do. We pass in our column index, right? Because that task already knows what column it's in based on being mapped, and it knows its task index, right, of that array. And then we're passing in a new status. All we're doing here is updating status. And when that happens, we're using Immer and its produce function to pass in the board data, make a draft of that data. So it's doing all the flattening stuff for us and making that new object and everything that it needs to do. Not really flattening, but is making new objects and stuff. Well, probably doing a lot of that on the back end, right, that we're not privy to, but that's okay. It's making all of its copies. And then what we're doing here is we pull out the task that we're updating based on just the location of that task, right? Board index at columns, column index, dot tasks, and we splice out the task index, and we're only splicing out one object, right? So this is where I'm able to make the adjustments to that object because it's made a copy of it. So let's say this is the task we're going to change the status to. It removes this task, right? And then it updates the status of that task to new status. Then based on whatever the new status is, we find that column index based on the name of the status, and then we push that task into that task array of that column. So if we're editing a task, not only can we make edits to the name and description and stuff and put this thing back into where it potentially already lived, but we're going to have to end up putting this thing back into maybe a different place entirely, maybe a totally different column. So that kind of sucks. But what are the ways we do that, right? We have the new task that we're going to take in. I'm thinking we just call the delete method we already wrote to delete the current version of the task, right? And we store that in well, I have store. I don't need to store. We're just going to delete that task, right? And then we'll call the add task method with our board data. We have to pass board data back into it. And we'll add our new task, right? So in effect, this isn't going to work out too great, right? Because maybe we have to make some changes here, but maybe I'll start here before we have our final product. Because all we're doing is we're pushing that new task right on the end of that array. And that's okay for us to start. So if let's say we make an edit to this task, this particular object here, we know we're making a new task out of it, quote unquote, right? New object out of it. Because we've updated, let's say, the title. Maybe that's all we change, but we get back another object. We'll get that object over here. We'll call the delete method on this particular object. And then we'll just push our new task onto the to-do array, right? And for now, we'll push it onto the end. It'll show up at the bottom after we've edited it. That's okay for now. Maybe we can go back and when we do the add task function, maybe we make an edit to this so we can send over an index number, a task index number, and actually update that array so we put that object back into the right place. So I don't know. Let's start. And I've talked about this for 15 minutes. Now I'm actually going to do something with it. So let's edit a task, right? And over here on my task view card, I called this edit task, right? So let's do export let edit task equal, which I can't call it edit task again, right? That's going to be messed up. I have to call it something different. So we'll call it edit task Immer for now. I don't know. It's okay. And that's going to be we're going to need the same kind of stuff we're getting here, where we take in board data and board index number, and we take in our task. All right, so I'll just copy that over here. Except here I'm going to call it edited task, right? Because this is actually something that already existed. And then we'll go into our actual function. And this is the stuff. So store a task in new variable. We already have it in the edited task variable, right? So I shouldn't need to do anything new there. We're going to call our delete method and remove the current version of the task. And then call our add and send in our new stuff. So how easily is this going to work out for us? Let's see. If we call delete task, we know we send in board data, board index, which we have, column index, which I don't have yet, and the task index number, right? So I guess then in that case, we're in task view card. All that stuff exists, right? I've got task index, I've got board index, I've got column index. So I can send all that stuff in, and let's do this. Let's send those other things in here. So we've got board index. We're going to need column index, which is a number, and we'll send in task index, which is a number, right? So those things are there. And Prettier's yelling at me for some reason. I don't know why. Hopefully that goes away. And that seems okay, so cool. So now we can call our delete method. So if I do delete task, right, with our board data and our board index and our column index and our task index, right? If I do that, we return an updated board. So I still need to store that somewhere, so we can say, I don't know, temp board for now equals that. So we know we get a temporary board object back with that task removed. And then we need to call the add task method with the board data from that we've returned with the new task to add that new task, right? So I should be able to just say call add task, right, with the now temp board as our board data that we're sending in here. Still going to send in that same board index number. And then our edited task goes in here as our quote-unquote new task, right? That really should just be task at this point if I'm going to have a better naming convention, but okay. And then also returns updated board, right? So I could just make this a return statement here just for the sake of making this a little more readable. Let's just for now do let final board equal that, so we know we get a board object there, and then we can we should just be able to return final board, right? And that'll send this back here. So let's do this. Now what we're going to do here is I'm going to need to import this. Do I already have an Immer function here? I don't, right? So we should import, and this is this way, right? It's not a default edit task Immer, right? And it's found that for me. That's great. And then we'll actually use it down here, or we'll uncomment this out. We'll just say let result equal edit task Immer. And we send in our board. See, it's yelling at me because I'm missing stuff, right? Expecting 5 arguments, but got 3. So we know we need board data, board index. Let's highlight this. Board data, board index, column index, task index, and then the edited task, right? So we've got board data first, board index is there. Now column index we need, column index, and then task index, and then we're calling this edited task, right? Not new task, edited task. And those are our 5 arguments. I'm going to get rid of this now and this. And then let's, before we do anything else, let's just console.log this result. Right? Actually, I don't want to completely remove what I've got there, but let's console.log this result. Just to see if we can look at the data first and see if it's actually doing what I expect it to do before I start updating everything. And did I not save all of my files? Is something, what do we got here? Unexpected in my Immer functions file. Let's see what's going on here. Why? Oh, yeah, no doubt. I didn't actually make this a function. Okay, there we go. So now we've got that. And let's go back here and let's set the color on this because I still can't stand the white one. Let's look at our console. And let's make this easy on ourselves first, right? We've got the very first one, build UI for onboarding flow, which is the first entry in our data. If we make an edit to this, and let's just throw edited at the end of this, and this is too big for my console to handle. So now we get our boards array that we just console.logged our result, right? And we know we're in our platform launch board, and we have our to-do column. So now the first task here isn't going to be build UI for onboarding flow anymore. It's build UI search, right? Because we know it's deleted. But now here's our build UI for onboarding flow edited. So it looks like it's doing what I want it to do. I'm currently just pushing it on to the end of this array. So now instead of console.logging this, let's actually set our board data, right? And allow this to do the updates that it should be doing. So let's reset this. Get rid of my console there. See what happens. So this, in effect, once we do this, this should move to the bottom of this because we're still just mapping over here. And we'll make a couple edits. We'll do edited title. We'll do an edit in description, throw a bunch of junk in there. And let's get rid of sign-in page. It shouldn't matter what edits we make to this because we're just basically inserting a new object here. And I should update this button instead of saying create task. It should say edit task, right? We'll do that in a second. And there we go. Now it's at the bottom. Build UI for onboarding flow edited. It only has the 2 tasks. There's the stuff we put in there. So that's working. That's a good first step, right? Let's edit this again, and let's move this over to the doing status. And there we go. That worked. Sorry, you can't see it because of my blocking, but it's moved to the bottom of that second column, so now it's in doing. So that worked. It's doing what we what we expected it to do. So now the other process is we can send in the task index, right? And we can, instead of just adding it in, we should, right? We shouldn't be moving this around. And if we look at our add task function here, right? It's only I guess I need to think about this for a second, right? Because I can send over the index number, and we can set this as another parameter here. And I guess we can have a default value, right? of like null, and we can just check before we do this push option, right? Because it's going to go to the end of an array, and I don't really think I need to set up in here, to find the number of items in that array. I don't need to do that. I would just say if the task index number exists, we have to do a different method. It's not going to be push anymore, right? We'll look at that again. We'll refresh our memory on array methods. But we're not going to push. We're going to actually insert this thing. So let's go look at MDN array methods, right? And MDN is an excellent source for refreshing our memory on all this stuff, right? So what do we have? Keep scrolling down this, please. Splice method changes the contents of array by removing or replacing existing elements and/or adding new elements in place, right? So splice is what we want to do, and the syntax is here. We have a delete count if a delete count exists at all, which in our case is going to be 0, right? We're not going to delete anything. We're going to start this at whatever our index number is. That's our insert, and then our item. So let's, I guess, give this a shot, right? Here you can see some examples of it where they inserted index 1, so the second item in the array, they're deleting nothing. They insert February. This is what the output is. So this is what we're going to do, right? We're going to do our task.splice, whatever index, 0, and our thing. So we have this open, right? So here's the push, right? So basically the other thing we're going to do is either we're going to push, or we're going to do this exact same thing, drafts.boards, board index.columns, blah, 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 tasks.splice, and we're going to need to do our task index 0 and then our new task, right? That's in effect what we're going to do, but only if we've got a value in task index, right? So let's, under edit task Immer, we've got task index there. We're already sending in task index here, so we know we have access to it. So now in add task, this is where the update's going to come in, right? And we can send over a task index, right? Which will be a number. What is my syntax on this? Do I do equals null, right? And it's number or null. Is that how that would work out? Let's get rid of my typing for a second. And let's let, we can just do equals null or 0, right? And let's highlight my null cannot be used here. Why? Well, you know what I could do? I could do -1, right? And this is still just a number, right? It's negative equals -1 should be the way that I said that default, if I'm not misremembering. So let's do a test here then. right? Because once we pass in task index, if it doesn't equal -1, we'll just console.log. Well, yeah, we can start that up top before I even get into my Immer function. So let's mess around a little bit, and we'll say like if task index is greater than 0, console.log our task index. And we can even say like task index is task index, right? Because it's either going to be -1 or a value, and then it's going to do that for us. So that's there. And let's go ahead and do an edit task. We've got add task. And then throw in task index at the end, right? And that, I think, is what we want. Let's give it a shot. If we look at our console, get rid of that. Let's make an edit here. Search, edited. I click that button. I'm not getting anything here. Let's see if it's less than 0. What's happening? Let's see if it's actually. No, I'm not getting anything. So that's interesting. Can we just console.log task index and see if that's, am I not able to do that here for some reason? Okay. So that's coming in as 0 now, which is cool. So I wonder why my, oh, right, because I only did greater than and less than. Duh, of course. I was doing the first object in that array, so of course the index was 0, right? So if it's greater than or equal to 0 is what we want. Otherwise, it's -1, right? So now I can get rid of that. And now that should work. Silly. So let's edit this one again. And we'll do edited 2x. And now we see task index is 0, right? And I still did the console log in the second one, so that's fine. So now we know we're getting that. And instead, if I just make a new task and do new task and whatever, see, now I'm not getting that console.log because we're defaulting that to a -1 value. Cool. I mean, it's a way to handle it, right? It's a thing to do for us. So now within our Immer function, now we can see if this is going to actually work the way we expect this to work with editing a task and putting it back into the right spot, where we can change both of these and we can make an if statement here, right? We can say if, let's say, if task index is greater than or equal to 0, right, which means if we're passing something in, then we're going to do this, else we're going to do this one, and push it on the end of whatever the array is. So let's see. That, I think, is going to do it for us. We've got that saved. Everything looks okay there. Let's drag this back. I'm not console.logging anything anymore, so we'll get rid of this. And we'll refresh this so we go back to our base data. let's do one in the middle here. Let's do build UI for search, right, which will be at index 1. And if we make some edits here, we'll do edited title. We'll put in whatever in our description. Fingers crossed. Oh, hey, look at that. Now that says edited. It's in the same exact spot as it was, and it's got our edited description in there. Very nice. I am pleased with this. That seems to be all the adjustments I think I need to make on actually editing a task, right? Because no matter what edits I make, even if I do this again now and I start adding new subtasks in here, it's all going to work the same way. Here it is. We can close this out. It's still in the same spot, right? Let's widen this out a little bit more. Let's look at editing a task. And here's the interesting part though now, right? If I edit and move a task, then it's going to have an index with it, right? So now it's gonna, if I do this, and you know what? Let me just take this as an example. If we do this and we throw edited here, and I change this to doing, it goes into the 0 index, right? Because that's the way that this is set up. Is that okay? I don't know. Maybe. It's working a way. I don't know, the way I have things set up right now, I don't have an easy way to check for this. We can think on this for a while. Maybe we can think of a different solution. But it is working. I would prefer that it go to the very end of this. But I don't really have a way. I guess what I could do when I'm removing that task, I'm not doing anything else here. If I really wanted to make this complicated, I could pull out that task and then we could compare the status of that task to the status of the new task. And depending on where that goes, if it's different, then instead of sending that task index over, we just push it to the end. But also, I'm still also thinking about drag and drop functionality, which I haven't even really done anything with here. I've just been setting up these functions and hoping that I can just carry them over. But drag and drop might be a thing too, just to rearrange these functions and move them around within their array. So I'm not even there yet. I'm gonna call this a partial success for now, because we're doing mostly what we want this to do. And we know there's probably some stuff that we can do to change the way that this works. I don't necessarily know that this is wrong in functionality. If I'm editing a task and I move it over that way, like I can change the status of this here, and this is going to push to the, again, it's behind me. I can change the status on one of these, right? And it's going to push to the bottom. And that's fine. If I edit a task and move it over that way, it's going to insert itself somewhere. I don't love it. I think I'll think on it for a while. I'm not gonna plan out a solution during this particular video, but we've got a good amount of functionality working here, and if we think about a different solution later, we can go back and we can make some adjustments to stuff. But for now, we've got this edit functionality mostly working, with the little asterisk next to it of a potential adjustment that needs to be made in the future. We'll see what happens to that. Thank you, as always, for following along. Hopefully this was a fun journey for you as it was for me, and we'll see you next time.